Hi, we're going to talk about the tomb of St. Peter. I want to preface this video by saying that I am going to stay away from any religious implications and try to remain as impartial as possible. This is not meant to be a religious video, just an informative one. Let the shenanigans begin. Let's go. St. Peter had been one of Christ's 12 apostles. He was alleged to have been born around 1 AD and to have died somewhere between 64 to 68 AD. Peter is said to have been the rock upon Christ would build his church. So essentially, he was the first pope, with his tenure as such being from 30 AD until the time of his death. In Judaism, he is said to have been an early rabbi. In Islam, he is said to be a prophet of God. And in the Baha'i faith, he is said to be a prince of apostles. Now, let's jump ahead to his death. During St. Peter's time in history, Christians were being martyred by the ancient Romans. And I want to take a quick aside and talk about why this was happening. Romans believed the following about Christians. One, Romans believed that Christians were incestuous. This is because they referred to themselves as brothers and sisters in Christ. Two, Romans believed Christians were cannibalistic because when they would have Mass, they would partake in the body and blood of Christ. Three, Romans believed Christians ate children. Romans believed this because Christ wasn't around anymore to be eaten. So they had to be eating something. Probably kids. And four, Christians did not worship the Roman gods. And worshiping the gods meant happy gods. And happy gods meant no destruction. So the Romans believed that they were justified in their hatred for the Christians. Now, Peter is said to be killed in a place called the Circus of Nero. If you have seen my series on the Vatican necropolis, you'll know about the Circus of Nero. I talk about it. And if you haven't, I do recommend you go check it out. It is really interesting. And people in the comments tell them how interesting the Vatican necropolis was. It was a lot of fun. People who know anything about Christianity know that Christ was crucified on a cross by the ancient Romans. In this time in history, crucifixion on the cross was a common torture method. When Peter's turn came, he felt that he was not worthy of dying the same way that Christ did. So he asked to be crucified upside down. This is why when you see or hear about a St. Peter's cross, it's always upside down. The death of Peter is just the start of this gigantic goat rodeo. And trust me, it gets much messier. I'll tell you all about it in part 2. Buckle up. I'll see you there. Welcome back to the goat rodeo. St. Peter's Tomb, part 2. Let's go. Finger guns. So once St. Peter died, Christians were afraid that Romans would dispose of St. Peter's body by throwing him into the river. However, Christians were aware of the Roman law that stated that one must not disturb the remains of the deceased once they are laid to rest. So, under the cover of darkness, Christians went in and confiscated Peter's body and buried him in a pauper's grave near the Roman necropolis. They chose this spot because it was near to the martyr site, the Circus of Nero, and they thought that he would just get lost amongst the rows of tombs that were already there. Early Christians were not able to afford large and opulent tombs like the ones that were in the necropolis. So they had to settle for a pauper's grave. They placed Peter into the earth and placed 2 slabs of marble on top of it that kind of leaned against each other. And this is what it looked like. They disguised the tomb to look like a pagan monument with no Christian symbolism on it, and they called it the Monument to the Trophy of Gaius. The Christians made space and placed this monument in such a way that they could consecrate water from it for baptisms. The grave was also near a road that early Christians were kind of clever in this way, that they placed the monument and located it on a road that allowed them to see down the road and to keep watch for any incoming Romans before they could be seen themselves. And if they saw someone coming, they would just disperse and run away. A while after the death of St. Peter, Emperor Constantine then gained power in Rome and chose to be a Christian ruler. Rather than moving the body of St. Peter from the necropolis, which would essentially make the most sense, he chose to inconvenience literally everyone and have them moved their loved ones, and then build a church right on top of the necropolis. Goat rodeo. Part 3, we're actually going to talk a little bit more on the excavation of the tomb and what was found in it. And that's when we're going to get into the whole necropolis. We're going to get down in there and talk about where in the necropolis this tomb is actually located. It's just going to snowball from here. It's going to get worse. I'll see you in part 3. The Tomb of St. Peter, Part 3. We're going to talk about the remains of St. Peter in this part and what was initially found. Now, we believe that St. Peter's remains are found in Tomb S of the necropolis. This is where they found 2 marble slabs that were like this and a pauper's grave that was filled with bones lined up against a red brick wall. When this was excavated, the bones were removed from the site and essentially they were handed to Pope Pius XII, who placed the bones in a box and went to show it to his papal physician. But the papal physician, who was most definitely not an archaeologist, examined the bones and went, yeah, that's about right. In his infinite wisdom, he concluded that the bones looked human and sufficiently old enough to be St. Peter. So, we did it! Yay! Goat rodeo. The bones were properly examined. It was found that the bones actually belonged to multiple people. They believe it was at least 3, most likely 2 females and 1 male. The male bones were no more than 30 to 40 years old, which makes no sense because at the time of his death, Peter would have been in his 60s. Goat rodeo. So, the Vatican closed the investigation on the matter and proclaimed that they found the tomb of St. Peter with absolutely no mention to the bones that did not match the tomb's namesake. So, goat rodeo. Now, here's where I'm going to reference back to part 3 of the Necropolis series that I did. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you go back and at least watch part 3 because the next little bit of what I'm about to tell you is going to be a little bit challenging to understand unless you kind of know the background. Monsignor Cass was one of the gentlemen on the excavation team when the necropolis was being excavated, and he felt that Father Kirschbaum, his counterpart, whom he hated above all else, wasn't being respectful to the remains as they were going along and digging and unearthing and finding more and more things. Monsignor Cass then took it upon himself to make sure that each of the bones were cataloged and carefully placed in a box to be reburied with honors and respect as they should. This is why Monsignor Cass has a special place in my heart through all of this. This is where the real main character of this whole ordeal comes in. Dr. Margherita Guarducci is a linguist and a specialist in ancient languages, and she discovers something very interesting on the tomb of St. Peter, long after everybody has kind of given up hope and moved on. And, oh yes, the madness has not ended yet. It's gonna get worse. I'll see you in part 4. Your wish is my command. The Tomb of St. Peter, part 4. Dr. Margherita Guarducci had been slowly going through the necropolis and as it was being excavated and was translating all of the ancient writing as it was being discovered. So she ended up lagging behind the Vatican operatives and their mission. When she finally got to the Tomb of St. Peter, she found something pretty interesting. If we look at the Tomb of St. Peter, when it was discovered, there was a grade wall that actually ran perpendicular to the red wall of the tomb. It was covered in ancient graffiti and was known moving forward as the graffiti wall. Really? Dr. Guarducci had noticed that the name Petrus had been written multiple times, and the Chi-Rho symbol, which usually means Christus or Christ, had been modified as well to look vaguely like a key. Now, in Christian writings, Peter is said to hold the keys to the gate of heaven, which is why people associate keys with him. So if you see any Christian iconography and you see keys or somebody holding keys, that's usually symbolizing Peter. Obviously, on this at side of this, Dr. Guarducci got very excited and was examining the wall. Now, what she found was on the back of the wall, like the opposite side, there was a hole that was hollow. And on the inside of the hole, on the side closest to the red wall, a rather large piece of red brick had fallen off. Dr. Guarducci, in typical main character fashion, reached in and pulled out the piece of fallen brick. At that point, she saw that it was engraved with the words Petrus Ini all along the top of it. Goat rodeo. Upon this discovery, Dr. Guarducci went back to look at the excavation records and to see what was found in that hole, because she had a very clear and convincing clue. The Vatican reported to her that nothing had been found in that hole. Goat rodeo. Moving forward, many months to years passed by at this point, and our beloved Monsignor Cass has passed away. But his influence on this entire operation still remains. Dr. Guarducci had been in an Italian cafe, and she ran into one of Monsignor Cass's assistants. They caught up over coffee, and their conversation eventually led to the graffiti wall and what was found in the alleged tomb of St. Peter. Dr. Guarducci lamented at having not found any remains in the hole of the wall, despite the evidence that led her to believe that there was something or someone that should have been found. The part where Cass's assistant, drops their coffee cup and says, "But Dr. Guarducci, we did find someone in that hole. We cataloged it and removed it to be buried later." Goat mother rodeo. Since things move very slowly in the Vatican, they were still waiting to rebury those remains, and they were just kind of holding on to them. And all of Monsignor Cass's efforts had been done without the Vatican knowing about it. Hence why Dr. Guarducci got a no from the Vatican when asked about what was in that hole in the wall. I mean, do I even need to say it at this point? Y'all know. I can't do it anymore. I'm fed up. I can't. So now Monsignor Cass's assistant and Dr. Guarducci rush back to the Vatican to look at those remains that had been cataloged and put away. So what did they find? Gotta wait for part 5. I'll see you there. The Tomb of St. Peter, part 5. Dr. Guarducci and Monsignor Cass's assistant got a hold of the aforementioned remains and had them analyzed by an archaeologist. And here's what they found. The first thing they noticed were these strands of ancient purple fabric. Now, in ancient Rome, the use of purple fabric was only done by the emperor. This is because the dye to make the purple was difficult to source, as it comes from grounding up the shell of a certain kind of snail. And not only that, but the emperor made it illegal to be owned by anyone other than the emperor. Just a little bratty, don't you think? The strands of purple fabric means that someone of emperor status either gifted this individual the purple shroud, or it was painstakingly acquired through alternative means. Next thing they noticed when they analyzed the remains was that there were more or less bone fragments from every part of the human body except the feet. If you recall from part 1, Peter was crucified upside down. Now, out of fear of the Romans disposing of the body, the early Christians went in and hurriedly removed Peter and buried him in the necropolis. If this is true, then it would make sense that they would cut him down by the ankles, as those would be attached to the cross with many nails due to gravity. Cutting the ankles would be the quickest way possible to remove the body from the cross. Now, I'll be honest, to me personally, this didn't make sense because wouldn't the hands also be attached by nails as well? But we seem to find these fragments of the hands. And before posting this video, I ran it by somebody, and the argument was made to me that it's possible that the hands were just low enough to reach and be able to remove the nails, and the feet probably weren't. And, you know, having to climb and then remove it would have been a lot, especially if they were rushing. Another reason they believe that these remains is the body of St. Peter is because the dirt that is kind of attached to the bones matched the dirt that was in the necropolis area. And it also matched the dirt of the graffiti wall. So it clearly spent time in both the ground and the wall. Why was this body moved to the hole in the graffiti wall? Christian scholars believe that it's due to the early Christians' fear of the Romans finding Peter's bones in the ground and desecrating the grave and the bones. So out of an abundance of caution, they took the remains and placed him into the wall that they created. And they made it increasingly difficult for those who were not in the know to find Peter. Finally, the bones were tested and found to belong to a male in his 60s who was possibly from the area of Galilee, and he was short and stocky, and this aligns with the appearance, description, and age Peter would have been at the time of his demise. It appears that we have found St. Peter because Dr. Guarducci is amazing and Monsignor Cass is the real MVP of this entire operation. But there's a twist that nobody saw coming. Apparently, there is another church in Rome who claims wholeheartedly that they actually found the remains of St. Peter. We're going to talk about it in part 6. I'll see you there. The Tomb of St. Peter, part 6. Now we have this other church coming forward claiming that they have the remains of St. Peter within their walls. And the goat rodeo continues. Oh boy. A little over 3 kilometers from the Vatican lies the Church of Santa Maria in Capella, and they had gone under restorations in 2014. Workers discovered that the main altar at the front of the church was hollow, and inside they found 2 urns, and on the lids were the carved names Anastasius, Cornelius, and Petrus. Inside the urns were many bone fragments of unknown origin, but they were believed to be human. So inside this church was a lot of St. Peter iconography, and there was a strange writing at the front of the church that was kind of carved into the wall, which dates back to the founding of the church in 1090. They also found the initials PET carved into the wall, which is usually short form for Petrus. Why would any of this hold any merit? You know, somebody could just as easily walk in and carve something on a wall and say, Maria in Capella was founded during the papacy of Pope Urban II. Pope Urban was famously known for being the pope who sanctioned the Crusades across Europe, starting in 1095. Urban II struggled with obtaining and maintaining authority. To enforce his legitimacy in Rome, he used the image and relics of St. Peter to solidify his authority as pope. It's a goat rodeo. I don't even have the energy anymore. We're on part 6 at this point. You guys know. Y'all know. It's just a mess. Naturally, historians wanted to have these remains tested in a lab and reviewed by archaeologists, because if you're claiming that they're the bones of St. Peter, then we need to have some answers. But the request was readily denied by the Vatican. Ah! So what does this all mean? I'll take you over to part 7, which will be the final part. See you there. The Tomb of St. Peter, part 7. This is the final part. And as we approach 3,000 followers, I want to say thank you to all of you who supported me and who's been a part of my lives and who has taken the time to really just talk history with me. You all mean the world to me. So here's part 6 and part 7 uploaded back to back. Now, we have the second set of remains, and they could just as easily be St. Peter. But the Vatican has refused for these remains to be tested because it would call into question the legitimacy of the current remains that are believed to be St. Peter, which would then call into question the legitimacy of the church. And, we can't have that. It was believed that at the time that the monument to the Trophy of Gaius was made and constructed, and St. Peter's bones were relocated to that graffiti wall, it's believed that some of the bones that were in the wall were brought to an alternate location, which would explain why some of the bones are missing and why everything just seems so fragmented and that we're missing a lot of pieces. It's believed that Pope Urban II had gotten a hold of these second set of bones and brought them to Santa Maria in Capella just before he announced the Crusades to solidify his authority within the papacy. There is a very good possibility that these could just be partial remains of St. Peter, especially if we look back at Pope Urban and his desire to be the authority of the church and the struggles that he had to go through to become the authority. And the only way he could be the authority of the church was to have the bones of St. Peter in his possession. Watching a documentary, and a historian said something really interesting. He said, history is nice, but we want souvenirs. And I think that kind of encapsulates this whole ordeal. We want to be able to say that this individual existed, and we want proof, and we want to be able to take that proof and take it everywhere we go. But as you've seen, this entire situation has been a goat rodeo, to say the very least. That's probably going to be the new catchphrase whenever nonsense like this happens. There's so many twists and turns. But this wraps up the tomb of St. Peter, where now we just have to assume that either of these remains could have very well been him. I loved taking this journey with you all, and I want to thank you all for hanging in there for all 7 parts. And as a special gift to you, I'm going to give you a sneak peek at our next series. Next topic that I will be covering will be the Donner Party and all of the shenanigans that went on during that rather dark time in American history. I can't wait to see you all there. Okay, bye!